Crystal masked the disappointment that appeared on her face. Fear sprouted in her chest when Galvin acted strangely. She smiled and asked, "Then, before you leave, can we discuss something?" "I want you to know that." She gathered her courage to spill the news. She reached for the test sheet she placed on the chair beside her. But Galvin suddenly spoke. "Galvin, one of these days, my lawyer will deliver you the draft of our divorce agreement. If you have a problem with alimony, discuss it with him. Divorce now." She was taken aback upon hearing the word she solemnly prayed she would never hear in this lifetime. "Are you sure to end it here?" Crystal retracted her hand from picking up the pregnancy test result, clenching it into a fist, and placed it on her lap when it didn't stop shaking from the emotion she worked hard to stifle. Not for Galvin to see her pitiful look. She fought the tears that began to mist her eyes, then pursed her lips into a forceful smile. How would she be able to forget him after a year full of memories they shared? Even though this marriage was merely a contract that would end any time soon, she hoped it would last longer. Although he kept their marriage a secret, she and Galvin shared such intimacy in the passing year. She loved him. The 1 year of marriage with him was like she was living in heaven. May Galvin never brought her into public. Then, she only had the wrong assumption he had forgotten his ex-girlfriend. Why? Is she not enough for him? She would never demand him to introduce her to the world that she was Mrs. Hudson. However, the agreement she signed was as clear as crystal that he would end it any time he desired. How about she stayed? Like his kept woman number, she is not that lowly of a person. Okay. After a long while of silence, Crystal replied, "The actuality is she has no strength to utter a single word." Galvin furrowed his brow at hearing her calm response. Although his marriage proposal came with such terms, Crystal was obedient throughout their marriage. She never gives him a pain in the ass, but she is always in the mood to do the task he demands of her as part of their role-playing game in this marriage. Even so, it never crossed his mind that she was his pet. But a wonderful wife, a man, could not ask for more. Realizing where his reverie was headed, Galvin was taken aback. How come he had such a thought? It may be true that Crystal satisfies all his needs. However, he dreams of marrying Fiona when the perfect time has arrived. And she accepts his marriage proposal. Crystal. She's back after a year since we agreed to take a break from each other. Fiona realized I was the one for her. Also, Galvin is reluctant to finish his words and speak further. With a solemn face, he added, "I'm sorry. I couldn't teach my heart to love you." "What are you saying?" Crystal let out a low chuckle. She shrugged and then added, "I understood the terms of our contract when I signed it. We will file a divorce once none of us forgets our past and fall in love." Galvin didn't understand. But he could feel his chest tightening upon hearing Crystal make such a statement. Then, she still hasn't forgotten her crush she dreams of marrying? Crystal failed to notice the changes in Galvin's tone the next time he spoke. She was busy suppressing the pain when a blade cut her heart into thin slices. Thus, she focused on brightening the atmosphere. "Congratulations! You must be happy now that she has returned." No wonder he was all dressed up after he made love with me, Crystal thought. Despite the needles that pierced his heart, Galvin could not bring himself to display the unpleasant feeling boiling inside him. "Is that all?" Galvin felt dejected. "What are you going to discuss with me?" Before he exploded unnecessarily and revealed such emotion, he changed the course of their conversation. Crystal shook her head and smiled. "It's about a new design of coats my friend showed me and asked me if you want additional sets of business suits similar to the one you wear today." After some thought, Galvin nodded. "Sure, I actually feel comfortable wearing her custom-made suits. Tell your friend I want to order a dozen sets of different colors." Perhaps she could include a blue-striped suit and a black one. Sure. I'll tell her the good news first thing tomorrow. Although her heart was bleeding, Crystal could not hide the excitement in her voice. She was happy for her friend to continue striving in the design industry. After news spread that Galvin ordered customized suits from her, the store flooded with more orders. Megan uses high-quality materials, so their customers are satisfied with her work. However, Galvin misunderstood her joy. He thought Crystal could not wait to divorce him because her high school ex-boyfriend also returned, and after they finalized the divorce, she would marry him then. If that's the case, I should get married soon first. Galvin was unaware that he had a childish thought. He only focused on the fact that Crystal would soon pleasure another man after he divorced her. Galvin clenched his hand into a ball, and his short fingernails dug into his palm. He sneered in his heart with gritted teeth, displeased with his head having crazy thoughts. Yet, he could not exhibit his irritation thinking another man was about to dig that hole of hers. All right. Then I'll go speak to my lawyer to visit you tomorrow to finish drafting our divorce agreement. Crystal squeezed a smile. Actually, I did not worry about the contents of the divorce papers. She doesn't care if Galvin would only leave her small alimony. However, she was pregnant with his child. It has rights for his company. Even so, Crystal did not voice her thoughts for fear that Galvin would make new arrangements that would devastate her. Thank you for agreeing to the divorce. I hope you can attend our wedding, said Galvin. He got up from his chair and was ready to take a step. He was waiting for her to shoot him a protest and beg him for her to stay. Okay. Crystal nodded, flashed a smile, then lowered her gaze to hide their sadness. She bit her lip to suppress the tears forming in the corner of her eyes. Seeing her listless answer, Galvin strode to the door with a grim face. Withholding his rage, Crystal was left alone in the penthouse. She placed her hand on her lower abdomen and looked around, reminiscing the memories she shared with Galvin in this very room. Don't worry, love. Everything will be all right. I'll ensure you'll receive all the love in the world, even without your daddy. Mommy loves you so much. Now that Fiona is back, and Galvin wants to fulfill his promise to his first love, she is afraid that Galvin will not let her go with their child. But he will take him from her. No matter what happened, she would not let him separate her from her child. She'll protect him with all her might. Chapter 1 has come to a close. Please stay with us as we read through the rest of this story. If you are watching, please give us a like and leave a comment telling us where you are tuning in from. Now, let's continue listening. Galvin exited the elevator in a foul mood. He missed noticing the security guards greeting him a good night. He walked straight to his car, slammed the door, and punched the steering wheel. The two security guards, assigned to the second-floor parking lot for the executives, and used as their boss's garage, shared a confused look. Mrs. Hudson used to dress plainly. Seeing her effort tonight, both grinned when they thought their boss would have the best time of his life. The security guards, aware of the secret marriage, became familiar with Crystal, who arrived almost every night in the past year. When their new boss started to live in his office, the missus came over to take care of him, and most of the time she came in, she was carrying grocery bags. And they would help her bring them over to the elevator, and even press the button for her. Mrs. Hudson would frequently bring freshly baked pastries and loaves of bread, which she'll share with them. She said the night shift is tough. Thus, they must have something delicious to accompany their coffee to stay awake. Mrs. Hudson is such a considerate Mrs. Therefore, they like her and admire their boss for having such a beautiful wife he hid at home. They could tell that although he kept his marriage a secret, he was faithful to her as they had never heard of any scandal in the past year. He stayed at arm's length to any women who threw themselves at him. They presumed their boss must love the missus so much that he wanted to keep her for himself by never letting the media have a glimpse of her. He assigned several security guards at night to secure the building from his enemies and the paparazzi, who planned to snoop around to dig for any information they could release to the public. Although the public is unaware of the penthouse on the rooftop, his enemies must have known about it. Meanwhile, the man, highly praised by his security guards, actually was fuming inside his car. Opposite to what they thought, his marriage would last forever. It was about to end. Is the truth. Galvin was irked that Crystal seemed relieved when they reached an agreement regarding their divorce. Marry me? You don't have to do anything but accompany me. He remembered, he told Crystal, when he proposed a marriage agreement. He could recall clearly that Crystal was thrilled when he proposed. Fiona, will you marry me? 2 years ago, the night before Fiona left for France, he was desperate to stop her from going. However, Fiona rejected him. Galvin, aren't we young to settle down? We're both 25, Fiona. It's the perfect time for us to start a family. Don't you think so? A chill ran down her spine when she heard the word perfect to start a family. The last thing that she wanted was to get pregnant. Having a child would be a hindrance to her modeling career. She loves her freedom more than anything in this world. However, she could not state it to Galvin. Seeing she was silent, Galvin took Fiona's hand and persuaded her. I promised you'll live a grand life once you marry me. How was that possible? She couldn't help doubting Galvin. Although the Hudson family is among the wealthiest families in the country, however, Galvin was a son of an illegitimate child the older Hudsons raised. Even so, Galvin is not the heir of the entire Hudson wealth. How would she live like an empress? If she married Galvin now, she loves Galvin, but has other plans, and giving up her freedom is not on the list. Then, after a year, Fiona visited her parents. He brought her to a high-end restaurant and proposed to her once again. Fiona, if you marry me now, Grandpa will give me the Hudson Enterprise and a large inheritance. We can have a fresh start. Isn't a great story we can tell our grandchildren that their grandparents had started from scratch? But now we were standing on top of the world. Galvin was too ambitious. Fiona could see that. Hudson Enterprise is about to collapse. There are more competent new companies that dominate the industry. But he's determined to save it. Not only that, Galvin plans to use her so that he can acquire this rotten company. What if Galvin failed to save it? Then she'll be a laughingstock to marrying a failure entrepreneur. Galvin, we're good, right? We can continue this relationship without settling down. You know, I've been dreaming of entering the fashion world and was offered to work with several brands. She works her ass off to be noticed in France. She would not throw everything away just for a small inheritance. How about after I acquire my inheritance, I'll accompany you to France and put up my company there. I have a French friend who plans to try a new business. Hearing this, Fiona was in a panic. Galvin, you don't understand. My contract isn't a solid one. It signed me up for just a tryout within 1 month, and it has clauses declaring that I should not date, especially to get pregnant. So I cannot live with you or announce that I have a boyfriend. You know the consequences I must face and fines for breaching the contract. Galvin's face sank. He was disappointed and hurt at the same time that Fiona had to keep their relationship a secret. How about this? 1 year. Give me 1 year. Okay, if my career blossoms and I make a name, then I am free to do whatever I want. But Fiona... Galvin told Fiona that his inheritance could not wait for 1 year. Fiona clenched her jaw and looked around. Then an idea flashed through her eyes. Galvin, I understand you want to build our future. Why don't you marry another girl you can introduce to your grandparents? What? Galvin thought he heard it wrong, and she was joking, but Fiona continues blabbing, which gives him a headache listening to her, explaining that if they genuinely love each other and are meant to be together, he can divorce his contracted wife, and she will give up her career. You're kidding me, Fiona. You know you are the only rightful Mrs. Hudson. Galvin became irritated. Hence, Fiona racked her head to find a way to appease him. Galvin, if it's about the company and inheritance you want to acquire, then I don't mind if you marry someone else for that intention. Look, did you see that waitress? She is beautiful. Don't you think so? Who are you talking about? Galvin glanced in the direction Fiona pointed at. He was no longer in the mood to eat dinner after Fiona's nonsense suggestions. She's gorgeous. It would not be a shame if you introduced her to your grandparents. What are you saying? Half-heartedly, Galvin looked over his shoulder and asked lazily. He saw many female waitpersons walking around the restaurant serving their guests. It's the waitress, standing next to Chef Raymond. Galvin stared at Chef Raymond and paid less attention to the woman beside him. Chef Raymond entertains foreign guests. Probably the guest had requested to meet him since he was one of the most skilled chefs in the world, and his restaurant received 4 Michelin star, so all wealthy people don't mind wasting money to dine here, which is worth it anyway. However, he could no longer enjoy his food. Stop the nonsense, Fiona. Galvin didn't hide his irritation when Fiona insisted he sought a contracted wife to get his inheritance. Why does Fiona not understand that she is the wife he dreamed of having? Do you want to bet? Fiona challenged him out of the blue, and he felt it would not end well. What do you mean? Galvin was in disbelief that Fiona would push him toward another woman. I'm saying that you'll end up dating her. That's it. He could no longer endure Fiona's crazy ideas. The night didn't end well. If Fiona did not challenge him and left him heartbroken, there is no way that he would agree to the blind date his half-sister arranged for him. Coincidentally, the waitress Fiona urged him to propose to is the blind date his sister had arranged for him. The woman is more than willing to sign a contract with him. Hence, after he received his inheritance, he purchased her a villa and a limited edition sports car she drove around. He also ensured her bank card was never out of money and never questioned how she spent it. He reckons it was his compensation for using her to forget the heartbreak Fiona gave him when she left the country to pursue her career in France, rather than choose to become Mrs. Hudson. And now Fiona is back and ready to become Mrs. Hudson. He must be glad, but a part of him seems to oppose his decision to divorce Crystal, thinking that Crystal is also willing to sign the divorce papers without appealing to him to keep her as his mistress. He could only think of one thing. Crystal probably gets back together with her ex-boyfriend. Isn't she accepted his proposal because of the same reason as he is? She also wanted to forget her ex-boyfriend. Crystal told him she accepted Leela's suggestion to have a blind date because her friend's friend, Stephanie Hudson, assured her that the man was outstanding. Stephanie is his beloved half-sister, so he could not turn down but meet his date. Now that it dawned on him, he noticed how Crystal dressed even lovelier when she went out. And now, there is a possibility that she is meeting another man. Having this thought, Galvin stepped on the brake pedal and exited his car. He walked around and kicked the tire several times until his toes almost broke from the force he put into venting his anger. There were a few vehicles that passed and honked at him. However, he would raise his middle finger, which shocked them. They only wanted to know if his car was broken and if he needed help, seeing he was such an asshole. They leave him after cursing him. Galvin laughs like a madman. He must look like a fool behaving like that. He returned to the driver's seat and drove aimlessly. His phone lit up, and Crystal's message popped on the screen. He stopped the car and checked the message. Galvin's lips curled into a smile that faded after he read Crystal's message. I'll return to the villa to pack things. I've already arranged an apartment to move into, so you can mail it to me when the divorce papers are ready. Congratulations, by the way. I'm glad Fiona is back. What apartment? I can help you move things for you, and I can deliver the papers myself. He only typed at such speed when Fiona was the person he must reply to. Now he found himself beating a 500 horsebow wear velocity for his reply to arrive without delay. Galvin offered his help to confirm his suspicion, hoping he'll meet Crystal's ex-boyfriend. However, there's no need. It would be awkward for my friend to see you. Galvin's face darkened when he read Crystal's reply. With the thought that Crystal is moving out of their betrothal house, and she'll begin to live with another man. Galvin smashed his phone into the dashboard out of his rage. Now, she couldn't wait for our divorce to reunite with her ex-boyfriend. Fuming, Galvin drove toward Fiona's apartment. She phoned him countless times this evening, but he ignored her messages as he was swamped with work. Though reluctant to go up, Galvin found himself taking the elevator. He didn't notice the paparazzi hiding in the bushes. You came. Fiona jumped on Galvin the moment she had a glimpse of him standing in her doorway. Although Galvin ignored her phone calls and messages this afternoon, she knew Galvin couldn't bear not seeing her after she demanded. He'd come to her place. Yeah. Galvin forced a smile as he stepped inside the apartment. His eyes squinted upon seeing the interior decoration that almost blinded his eyes. The apartment seemed spacious, but became narrow because of unnecessary decorations. Using gold as a main theme is a good idea. However, Fiona uses too much gold in everything. From the walling, the frames of paintings and vases scattered around the floor, and the four corners of the apartment. It looks too lavish compared to his villa. Crystal decorated their house with minimal furniture. She didn't fill the house with unnecessary decorations. He preferred that. Galvin was taken aback to have this thought. Fiona is the love of his life. He must not compare the two women regarding their preferences. Instead, he must appreciate Fiona's choices. Soon, she will be his Mrs. Hudson and be in charge of managing their betrothal house. Right now, he must have been used to his villa. That's why. I'm glad you're finally here, Fiona purred, reverting him to his senses. She grabbed his arm and hooked it around her waist so she could nestle into his embrace. Now she looks like a leech clinging to Galvin's body. Galvin could feel Fiona's chest pressing into his body. Strangely, he didn't have any reaction. He peered at the pitiful woman in his arms, but could not avoid recalling Crystal's sad eyes. Before he walked out the door, he stared at Crystal's beaming face, but her eyes seemed sad. He couldn't figure out whether he was only angry by that time. And he overlooked it. Could it be that I am falling in love with Crystal? Suddenly, Galvin came to a realization. Galvin, the store I visited this morning bullied me. They were renting in your establishment. Can you avenge on my behalf? It upset her when those useless store employees failed to please her. But she took this opportunity to test Galvin to see if he was still the man who begged her to marry him a year ago. Although the store belongs to Crystal's friend, you will not let them off the hook, right? Galvin creased his forehead. His face displayed confusion. Fiona was perturbed, however. He must get what she aimed for tonight. Galvin, haven't you read my messages? I really love that dress. But the store manager told me it belonged to someone else. Fiona pouted and continued ranting. However, Galvin was in a trance. All he understood was the word red dress, and Crystal was invading his head at once wearing one. In his recollection, that dress was now in the trash bin after he tore it apart. Galvin, are you listening to me? She looked up and found Galvin in a daze. Fiona constricted her pupils. But she must calm down. Instead, she showed Galvin how hurt she was because of this morning incident. On the other hand, Galvin felt guilt over himself upon seeing her grievances being bullied by insignificant people. Don't worry, I'll take care of it. He hurried to promise Fiona that she did not suspect his thought was drifting off somewhere. Galvin promised her and even coaxed her. It was enough for Fiona to be in a great mood, but she didn't reveal her triumphant grin. Humph, Crystal, you can never bet me. I know in Jason's heart there will be only me. Fiona's smug smile appeared on her delicate face but disappeared quickly. Galvin sensed a sudden change in Fiona, but he must be only distracted by thinking of Crystal. Thus, he had partial hallucinations. "Thank you, Galvin. I know you are the only man for me." She regretted letting Galvin marry Crystal. She received news that Crystal often hangs out with Galvin's grandmother. Although Galvin's marriage is kept a secret, the thought that his family accepts Crystal infuriates her. After a year, she didn't think twice about going home and appeared before Galvin. Now she'll take back what belongs to her. Galvin successfully revived Hudson Enterprise and even started another company in Asia. He found an opportunity there. And now, just after 1 year, Galvin's status skyrocketed not only because he is Hudson, but due to his hard work of becoming a self-made billionaire. She knew that everything he'd done was for her. Now she must claim her rightful throne. And that being Mrs. Hudson. Suppose Galvin introduced Crystal to the public, but he didn't. She recalled when Galvin told her she was the only Mrs. Hudson in this life. Thinking over it, Fiona curled her lips with another triumphant smile. However, she must show Galvin how sorrowful she was when she rejected his marriage proposal. "Galvin, is it okay for you to divorce Crystal?" Her voice cracked. "I broke your heart and chose to return to France instead of building our family. You don't know how guilty I am. Every day, regret eating me. I often had sleepless nights, and my boss scolded me because I didn't care for myself. But I'm working hard to make my name in the fashion world, so I deserve to stand by your side. You know that your family." Fiona trailed off the rest of her words when she reached the part about mentioning his family. The Hudson disapproved of their relationship because the Grayson family was not a match for them. They may have entered politics, but they were not that remarkable either. Thus, Galvin understood Fiona's concern. She was always that soft girl who accepted his family's aggravation toward her when he brought Fiona home to attend family gatherings. Fiona would only cry in the corner. Thus, he intended to marry her so his family would not mistreat her. However, Fiona desired to enter the fashion world in France to make her name even known. Then, his family would not look down on her. Galvin's heart softened at the thought. He also worked his ass off for his and Fiona's future to the point he got sick. Although Crystal took care of him, her presence must not sway his decision to get a divorce. "Don't feel bothered about my divorce. Crystal had agreed already. I'll speak to Kurt to draft our divorce agreement. But your family likes Crystal. The only title waiting for me is being your mistress, Galvin." Tears formed in the corner of her eyes. Galvin felt a pang in his heart seeing her pitiful look. Fiona felt guilty about breaking off his marriage with Crystal. At the same time, she was worried she would receive backlash from the people once the news got out that he was actually married but was dating someone else. "I've said already, you have nothing to worry about. Mrs. Hudson's crown will always be yours," he told Fiona to comfort her. Yet, it felt strange that he could not tell Fiona that he didn't expose his marriage to the public because she was the only woman who deserved to stand by his side and share his success. Does he now have doubts about his feelings for her? He felt guilty toward Crystal, but displeased that she could not wait to part with him. Once again, Fiona noticed that Galvin was in a trance. She narrowed her gaze and asked, "Galvin, are you falling in love with Crystal?" Fiona caught the reluctance in Galvin's eyes. She bit her lip, then went on. "Galvin, I still feel bad that I made wrong decisions in the past. I would understand if you harbor feelings for Crystal. I'm sorry that I left." Fiona squeezed some tears as she went on. "Now that I realized what I wanted, I would no longer leave your side. I don't care if a promising career awaits me in France." Fiona sobbed. And Galvin comforted her. "Stop the nonsense question, okay?" Galvin disguises the shock in his tone. The question that startled him came out of the blue, but he must remain calm and conceal the panic in his eyes. Then he added, "Everything between Crystal and I is just a contract. You are the only woman I love. You know that. I love you too, Galvin. Galvin swallowed hard, and Fiona noticed when his throat bobbed up and down. She darkened her eyes at the thought that maybe Galvin had truly fallen in love with Crystal, but he only lied, despite her resentment toward Crystal. Fiona calmed down and kept on with her act, remorseful toward Crystal being used by them. Don't worry, I'll compensate her, said Galvin in the end. Fiona was unhappy hearing that. She regretted mentioning how sorry she was for Crystal. No, that money is mine. She would not allow that other than her, someone to have a share in Galvin's wealth. However, Crystal was still Galvin's legal wife. She has no say in anything yet. All right, up to you. She could only put up a front of being an understanding ex-girlfriend. That's my girl. Galvin felt relief in his heart. He always knows that Fiona is the woman who is perfect for him. She is gentle and kind. He wondered why his family didn't see that. Although he was satisfied with Crystal, he promised to marry Fiona after 1 year. And as his head brought up Crystal again, he cursed under his breath. Did you say something? Fiona felt the changes in Galvin's mood. She looked up and saw his faint smile. He replied, Yeah, I said I want to kiss you. Fuck! Galvin sneered in his heart. Why does he keep thinking of Crystal? What's the matter? Fiona noticed his uninterested mood. Before she overthinks, he hurried to squeeze a lie. I have forgotten that I scheduled a conference with my Asian business partners. I should return to the company now. Okay. You should head back, Fiona urged him, full of understanding. I'm sorry. Galvin was about to explain further, but Fiona placed 2 fingers on his lips. Hush. It's for our future children, so I understand its importance. Seeing how understanding Fiona is, and she even brought up having children, Galvin's eyes twinkled with delight. Countless times he proposes to have a family with Fiona, and it is the perfect time they'll fulfill their promises to each other. All right, I'll see you tomorrow morning. Galvin kissed Fiona before he headed to the door. Huh, how pitiful. Fiona watched Galvin's back swallowed by the door. Once the guy disappeared in her line of sight, her face brightened at the thought that she won over Crystal. Galvin could not still resist not seeing her when she asked him to see her. Meanwhile, Galvin drove aimlessly again. He doesn't want Fiona to think she isn't as desirable as before, because he falls in love with Crystal. He parked his car in the driveway and hurried out. The villa was too silent. He had this rough guess that Crystal had left already. Again, his chest filled with resentment. However, it surprised him to see Crystal's luggage in the entryway. Seeing that she was ready to leave him any time soon, he clenched his teeth and almost kicked the bags out of annoyance. Why am I getting vexed anyway? He could not pinpoint the main reason for his anger. Galvin marched toward his minibar and took a red wine from his vintage collection. He did not care to get a glass but gulped down straight in his throat. He coughed and cursed between his hard breathing. The wine failed to appease his raging chest. Thus, after he emptied the bottle, he staggered toward the master bedroom to find Crystal sleeping peacefully on his bed. Galvin gritted his teeth that she had the best time of her life to sleep, while he was like a fool, throwing a tantrum for an unknown reason. Is it because of the divorce? But he's the one who asks for it. Galvin, is that you? What are you doing? She asked with a surprised look. The divorce papers aren't signed yet, he whispered, his voice laced with a possessive edge that left Crystal trembling. You are still my wife. What? Do you expect someone else instead? Through gritted teeth, Galvin growled at Crystal. But Galvin, we're about to get divorced. She whimpered. At that moment, Galvin was determined to punish her. What are you saying? We're husband and wife as long as I haven't signed the divorce papers. Got it. Galvin, please. Crystal begged him. She was worried about the fetus growing in her womb. Her pleas made Galvin exasperated. "Remember, you are still Mrs. Hudson." She heard Galvin groan into her ear before she drifted into a deep slumber. The following morning, the constant doorbell awakened Crystal. She glanced at the space beside her, and Galvin wasn't there anymore. Today is Saturday. Although Galvin sometimes works on the weekends, he doesn't leave home this early. "Phut!" Crystal cursed in her heart. Again, someone hits the button, which creates an annoying chime. Since she was pregnant, she had become irritated. However, she only suppresses the urge to yell at the person behind the door. Still, she doesn't want Crystal to suspect the changes in her manners. Crystal pushed her body out of bed and got dressed. She caressed her lower abdomen with worry about the fetus's condition. She gently traced her lower abdomen, her mind drifting back to the emotional whirlwind of the previous night. Then her thoughts snapped when the doorbell rang again. She hurried to the door to find Fiona, standing at the doorway, wearing a floral dress and exquisite makeup. "Fiona, what are you doing here, early in the morning?" Fiona shot her a ferocious gaze. She wondered if Galvin had caused them. Her heart was fuming with rage at this thought, but she quickly concealed her extreme anger toward Crystal and forced a fake smile. "I'm here to pick up Galvin. Grandma is celebrating her birthday soon. Galvin has often invited me to the party, so we are going to buy her a birthday present." There was a smug smile on Fiona's lips that annoyed Crystal. Fiona entered the door even though she didn't invite her inside. This is her and Galvin's betrothal home. How dare she invade their privacy? Can't she wait until she signs the divorce paper? Crystal was irked having this thought. But she could not scold Fiona as she heard footsteps descending the stairs. Crystal turned around, looked up, and found Galvin wearing a casual shirt and jeans. It only means he had no plan to work today. She doubts Fiona at first, but now the woman is actually telling the truth that Galvin will accompany her shopping. "Galvin, I'm here." Fiona runs toward Galvin and hooks her slender arms around his neck and peeks a kiss on his left cheek. "You should be careful. The floor is slippery," he reminded Fiona, and it widened her smile. "All right, I'll listen to you after I moved here. I'll buy a beautiful carpet to cover the floor. Then you don't have to worry about me breaking my legs." Fiona's voice is full of coquettishness. Galvin was void of emotion when he glanced in Crystal's direction. He doesn't look reluctant about being kissed in front of his wife, which makes Crystal jealous. Still, he was the legal husband to the woman standing a few meters away, witnessing this scene. Galvin retracted his gaze from Crystal. His attention shifted to Fiona, and he asked her, "Why did you come?" "It's still early in the morning. Haven't I told you I will pick you up instead? I missed you, so I came right away the moment I opened my eyes." Still, Crystal wanted to disappear and wished she had not heard this sweet talk. When Galvin spoke gently to Fiona, it pierced her heart with needles. Averting her gaze, she pursed her lips and suppressed her irritation when Fiona glanced in her direction with a smug smile that was out of Galvin's line of sight. So he didn't see how a drama actress his ex-girlfriend was. On the other hand, Galvin narrowed his gaze when Crystal simply turned around and did not correct Fiona earlier. He purchased this house under her name, so she had all the rights to this house. Aside from that, for unknown reasons, he was upset that Crystal seemed unaffected to see him intimate with someone else. Is it because it started their marriage in a bet that Fiona suggested? Hence, she let her state all that? Or is it because she met her crush again? The reason Fiona's presence did not bother her at all, Galvin's chest pounded rapidly out of displeasure. And this did not hide from Fiona. She shot a dagger look at Crystal's receding back, and with intention, she spat loudly. "Galvin, can we take a seat?" "I'm famished, so my legs felt weak." She bent her knees slightly and tightened her hold around Galvin's neck so he could feel her legs wobbling due to hunger. Fiona's body slowly slid down due to out of strength. Galvin lowered his gaze and frowned upon seeing the beads of cold sweat on her forehead. "Haven't you had your breakfast before you came here?" "No." Fiona shook her head pitifully, but then her face grimaced. She reached for her head, pretending like she was dizzying. She wanted Galvin to think she had hurried to see him to the point of forgetting to eat. "Silly! Come here!" Galvin poked his nose lovingly, which Crystal saw when she glanced at the two. Galvin scooped Fiona, gently placed her on the nearby sofa, and said, "Stay here. I will make a quick breakfast for you." "No, stay with me." Fiona held tight to Galvin's arm. Crystal trembles at the thought that Galvin is willing to cook for Fiona. Galvin never did that for her in the 1 year of their marriage. "Fine." Galvin gave in. He looked up and called for Crystal. "Make my breakfast. I'll eat before leaving." At that moment, reality struck her hard. This is absolutely the difference between a first love and a contracted wife. Ignoring the sharp blades stabbing her heart, Crystal nodded and resumed walking toward the kitchen. She suppressed the rage boiling in her chest, listening to Fiona's irritating voice while coquettishly speaking to Galvin. She understood that Fiona deliberately raised her voice for her to hear that any request she would ask Galvin, he would grant it. Biting her lip, she pretended she heard nothing and carried on making breakfast. "It's done," Crystal announced soon. She prepared 2 plates of full breakfast. "Wow. I didn't know that you still preferred the breakfast I love." Fiona's coquettish voice buzzed in Crystal's ears. Galvin entered the kitchen with Fiona in his arms, and he was too careful when he put her down on the chair next to him and served the breakfast Crystal prepared for him. Crystal, on the other hand, raised her brows when Fiona insisted that the breakfast she made was her and Galvin's favorite. "Is she for real?" Crystal clenched her jaw. Galvin wasn't aware that she secretly took nutritionist courses to supervise his correct diet after he got sick. However, she did not say anything correcting Fiona and boosting her medical knowledge. Crystal simply turned around, walked to the fridge, and fixed herself breakfast since Galvin gave his portion to Fiona. And she wouldn't let him leave home without eating anything. Throughout this drama, Galvin remained silent. He just hummed and nodded while serving Fiona. Jealousy invades Crystal's heart. But she has no right to feel that way. Galvin is such a considerate man. Even after Fiona hurt him, he remained in love with her. Galvin showed how he cares about the marriage. He promised to protect her. He said he would not abandon her and give her what she deserved as his wife. Their marriage sails smoothly to the point she hallucinates. Galvin is falling in love with her, but she must face the truth. Galvin was still madly in love with Fiona. His promises to her a year ago are just out of his kind heart. He was a responsible man to the point of compromising anything to perform his duty as a husband. And that also applies to Fiona, his first love. Ugh, Crystal covered her mouth. All of a sudden, she felt nauseous after a foul smell caught her nostril, and her stomach reacted fast. She rushed to the bathroom when she could no longer stand the odor coming from the breakfast she fixed for herself. "Crystal, what's the matter?" "Galvin." Crystal was shocked to see that Galvin followed her to the bathroom. She panicked but calmed herself in an instant. She explained to Galvin, "I'm fine. You have nothing to worry about." "You don't look well, Crystal. I'll bring you to the hospital." It does not convince Galvin that she is fine when the color on her face has disappeared, and vomiting caused by a stomachache only means it is severe. That was his illness. This he knew it's something not to ignore. "I'll take you to the hospital." Crystal panicked when Galvin declared that. Thus, she was squeezing her brain to look for an excuse. Galvin would learn about her pregnancy if he accompanied her to the hospital. "Galvin," I said, "it's just a minor abdominal pain. I know better than anyone if something is going on in my body. Right?" Crystal eyed Galvin, hinting she had known enough medical knowledge to differentiate her discomfort from the symptoms. However, Galvin was firm in bringing her to the hospital. She was stubborn, and he knew she would not have a checkup if he wouldn't accompany her. It's better to make sure what it is than ignore it. Then, your condition is actually serious. His perspective is based on his own experience. Also, they were about to get divorced. What would their family say if they learned he didn't care enough about her well-being? Once they were divorced, then, who would take care of her? Galvin was terrified when he had this thought. Why did he care for her so much when they were getting divorced? Although he admits that Crystal provided him with mental and physical support in the 1 year of their marriage as she handled his well-being when he was sick, he returns no emotional attachments to her except money and bed. While he was generous to her allowance, he used her body and did whatever he thinks is an exciting play to his heart's content. On the other hand, Crystal didn't know whether she should laugh or cry with the concern Galvin showed her. Why now when he was about to divorce her? Isn't it ironic? It's not serious. Probably I just ate something spoiled last night. Galvin creased his forehead and asked, What did you eat last night? Is it the food you bought at Chef Raymond's restaurant? Crystal could see the displeasure on Galvin's face. Galvin probably blames the restaurant for something wrong with Chef Raymond's dishes. He prepares for them. I haven't eaten that. Crystal explained coldly. When you left last night, I also left and returned home to pack up. After that, I was famished, so I fixed something from the fridge. I think I must dispose of the old ingredients and buy new stocks. Galvin scrutinized her for a long time. He seemed to ensure that she was telling the truth. However, Galvin had thought differently. He was upset that Crystal preferred to pack her stuff than to remember eating dinner. Is this how excited she was to leave me? Gloominess clouded Galvin's eyes. But he ignored the fact Crystal was eager to finalize their divorce. In the meantime, Crystal had to stay by his side as long as he did not sign it. Let us see! Something was brewing inside Galvin's head, and Crystal was oblivious to his thoughts. As she was only concerned with her own heartache, Crystal felt cold in her heart when Galvin remained silent for a long while. She no longer has high expectations of him, but she throws up in the sink again. Thus, she was anxious when he insisted on taking her to the hospital, which she could no longer decline. Downstairs, Fiona followed Galvin into the garage. She beamed when he got the car ready. Galvin, I'm ready. Fiona approached the car. Her voice was vibrant, meaning she didn't feel weak anymore. That's good. You can go to the mall first. Fiona creased her forehead. Confused, she asked, What do you mean? I need to take Crystal to the hospital, Galvin retorted, which shocked Fiona. She was in disbelief and thought she heard it wrong. Aren't we buying Grandma's gift? Fiona raised a question while grabbing the car handle and opening the door. She was about to sit in the passenger seat when Galvin replied to her query. Don't worry. I'll be right there after Crystal's checkup. Fiona felt like the sky had fallen on her head. What does Galvin mean by that? She thought Galvin got the car for them to head to the mall and left Crystal after she tried to put on an act so that Galvin would stay. Fiona was fuming, thinking that Crystal had won today. However, there's no way she would yield and accept defeat. Not in this life, Fiona thought. Galvin, how would I go to the mall? I didn't bring my car. There is no taxi passing by. This estate was exclusive to a few owners only. Thus, no one just coincidentally passed by on private property premises, and no one can get through the entrance without a pass. I'll come along. No, wait here. Corey will pick you up and drive you to the mall, said Galvin, which irked Fiona. She retracted her hand from the car handle and clenched it into a ball. She was exasperated, but did not show Galvin how upset she was that he would leave her here alone instead and accompany Crystal to the hospital. Right at that moment, Crystal emerged from the front door. She was carrying Fiona's bag. Thus Fiona snatched it from her, dusting it like Crystal had a contagious disease. Fiona shoots a glare at Crystal. She is giving her a mocking look, sizing her up. She's really out of fashion. She thought Crystal's choice of clothes was hilarious. Crystal, don't dare to assume that Galvin's kindness is out of love. He only felt guilty about you. Also, I was the one who urged him to bring you to the hospital. Be grateful to me, and I let you borrow Galvin for 1 year. Now that I've returned, I'm here to take him back, Fiona said, like they were talking about a toy she threw. Now she wants to pick it up when she sees it benefits her lavish lifestyle. Before Crystal could counter, Fiona stepped closer and lowered her voice, saying, I know you have had a crush on him since high school. Am I correct, Crystal? Crystal trembles when Fiona reveals her secret. She indeed had a crush on Galvin, which started in high school. But Crystal calmed down and pretended she was unaffected by whatever Fiona said. She ignored her and walked toward the car. Before she went inside, she shot Fiona an indifferent look and then parted her lips with a smug smile, implying that she was still the legal wife and that even though she was the beloved ex-girlfriend, she was the third party in this marriage. Fiona understood the hint exhibited in Crystal's eyes. She gritted her teeth, watching the car's tail light disappear in her line of sight. She was left fuming with rage. She walked to the house to find the door was locked. How dare she? Crystal had locked the house. No wonder she brought her bag out with her. Fiona stomped, marched toward the gate, and sat at the nearby bench, cursing in her heart. I'll make sure that soon Galvin will kick you out of this house, Crystal. In the car, Crystal keeps glancing at the man behind the wheel. They were speeding, and she feared they would meet an accident early in the morning. Galvin initially ignored her burning stare, but it was becoming frequent, and he could not concentrate on the road. Galvin tried to ignore Crystal, but it bothered him being stared at. He waited for her to spill out whatever she wanted to say to him, but she remained silent. If you have something to say to me, you must say it now while we're halfway in the hospital. It startled Crystal when Galvin suddenly spoke. She panicked but calmed down at once. Honestly, she was like sitting on pins and needles, watching Galvin drive hurriedly to the hospital. She was anxious he would find out she was pregnant. Hence, she was racking her head with what excuse she could tell him. What is it? Galvin glanced at Crystal one more time. He could sense she was nervous. Thus, he suspected her, wiping the beads of sweat forming on her forehead. Crystal swallowed and looked at Galvin calmly. She said, I wanted to apologize. Because of me, you have to cancel your plans with Fiona. How about this? Why don't you drop me at the hospital gate? Then you can turn around and fetch her. Crystal suggested this, and it made Galvin speechless. Indeed, the distance between Corey's apartment and the villa was great. If he turns around now, he could return to the estate before Corey arrives. However, Galvin shot Crystal with a suspicious glare. Why doesn't she want him to accompany her to the hospital? He was in disbelief that Crystal would even urge him to accompany his ex-girlfriend. That's right. Until they were a legal couple, Fiona was the third party in this marriage. And where could you see a legal wife encouraging her husband to see the mistress? Unless the wife is also doing a suspicious act behind her lawful husband. With this viewpoint, Galvin's mood soured, and for unknown reasons, it puzzled Crystal why Galvin seemed mad. She thought, isn't I being generous? Allowing him and Fiona to be together? You needn't be concerned about Fiona. We are still married, so you are my responsibility. After a long while of silence, Galvin finally spoke, but his response made Crystal wince. So that's it. Of course, he will receive Grandma's endless scolding if she learns I am unwell and Galvin does nothing. Crystal's heart was broken, reflecting upon this. She composed herself and said, You don't need to feel guilty if you are worried about Grandma. I've already agreed to the divorce, so you shouldn't be concerned about me. Honestly, Crystal does not know what to think. It confused her whether she would be happy that Galvin was faking concern toward her. It may be true that she wishes he would also be worried about her. She had thought of this because she had the illusion. Her wishful thinking that Galvin would work in this marriage, and she would have a little more time to enjoy the title of being his secret wife. If only the world stopped spinning and the clock stopped ticking. When that happened, she would be the happiest being with Galvin at this moment. After all, she is honestly greedy and longs for his love. On the other hand, as Crystal brought up the divorce, Galvin tightened his hold on the steering wheel and subconsciously stepped on the gas. Galvin. Crystal panicked when she noticed the car shooting like a space rocket on the highway. Thank God it was Saturday morning. It wasn't rush hour. Then, she heaved a sigh of relief when Galvin gradually decreased their speed. You said I should go get Fiona after I dropped you in the hospital. Why were you nervous when I accelerated the car? Galvin spat. Crystal was rendered speechless after Galvin sounded mad. It baffled her at first, but then she almost laughed in her ass after she understood his intention. He wanted to hurry to fetch Fiona and accompany her shopping. Now he was upset with her. As Crystal remained silent, Galvin shot a dagger in her direction and then blurted out of the blue. Don't worry. Once the divorce is done drafting, I will remember to sign it. But for now, I want Grandma to celebrate her birthday peacefully. So I don't want you to bring it up again. Crystal fought the tears hanging out in the corner of her eyes. She tightened her hold on the hem of the jacket to force a smile. She replied, All right, I understand. After that unpleasant conversation, the entire ride was dead silent, deafening her. Crystal wanted to open her mouth, but chose not to when Galvin was in a foul mood all of a sudden, and she was the one who caused it. Crystal comforted herself, beyond the fact that she was oblivious to what was truly playing in Galvin's mind. He was actually distrustful of her. Galvin was annoyed, because she seemed afraid he would accompany her for a checkup. He had this hunch that she was hiding something from him, and that was what he wanted to find out soon. It dawned on him that Crystal was avoiding many things lately, which seemingly caused a change in her behavior. He was sure it was not just a hallucination or a wrong presumption. After 20 minutes, Galvin entered the gate of the largest hospital in Brook City. Crystal thought he would only drop her at the entrance. Thus, she prepared to get out. However, Galvin headed to the parking lot and parked in the reserved space under the Hudson Corp. reservation. Hudson Corp. is one of the major stakeholders of this hospital. Therefore, they were given their own parking space. Meanwhile, Nancy was confused when Galvin exited the car and opened the door for her. She wondered if this was okay. In the 1 year of their marriage, there were only rare occasions that Galvin accompanied her somewhere, and those were only places hidden from the public's eyes. Then, what is he doing now? Is he planning to announce to the citizens of this city that he is a soon divorcee? How ironic it will be. Crystal inhaled, then breathed out. She mustered some courage to spit out the excuse she came up with, but Galvin had already walked toward the entrance before she could open her mouth, leaving her behind when she was reluctant to get out of the car. Is he earnest about appearing like this? She still feels the irony of it. Galvin is one of the hottest billionaires in the world. At a young age, he managed to save a dying company and even put up his own in Asia and become a capitalist magnate just within a year. Crystal had no choice but to follow Galvin. She was tailing him, and people couldn't help but stare at them indifferently when she looked suspicious because of her outfit. While Galvin was a hot stud gracing everyone's eyes, this is embarrassing. She regretted not choosing the trench coat to cover her bruises from wild sexual intercourse last night. Now her choice of clothing for the day is so out of fashion, and it didn't match Galvin's attire. We're here. Galvin suddenly announced that startling Crystal. She raised her head to check out whose clinic Galvin had taken her to. She sighed with relief when she knew the physician. "Hello. Good morning, sir. Are you here to see Dr. Miller?" She was about to clock out from the night shift. The nurse was all smiles entertaining Galvin. She missed noticing that Crystal was standing behind him. "Nessie. It's me. Oh, Miss Pearson." It surprised the nurse to see her being with the city's dream husband. "Galvin Hudson? Are you with him?" Crystal nodded. "Mr. Hudson has a kind heart to drive me here." Before any misunderstanding ensued, Crystal had already made an explanation. It will save her from embarrassment if she declares Galvin is her soon-to-be ex-husband. Isn't that sweet gossip for the hospital? And soon in the entire Brook City. Unbeknownst to Crystal, her denial of their relationship has even concreted Galvin's suspicion. Is she meeting her ex-boyfriend here? Galvin knew that Crystal often visited the hospital to meet her professors. Before, it did not bother him, but now he is curious as hell about what she's doing when he is not around. "Crystal. What's the matter?" "Good morning, Dr. Miller. Are you heading home from your night shift?" "Yes, but I don't mind assisting you." "What's wrong?" Dr. Miller offered the chair in front of her table. Crystal and Galvin took a seat. She vomited while having breakfast. Galvin beat Crystal to answer the doctor's question. Both Crystal and Dr. Miller didn't expect Galvin to be excited, although the former who the doctor interrogated. It was he who diligently answered the interview. Observing him, Crystal had the illusion that Galvin was actually paying attention to her. But her bubble thoughts went off when the doctor shot the next question. "When is your last period?" Crystal was prepared to lie. However, Galvin answered again. He looked at Crystal and said, "I don't remember the last time you had your period." Dr. Miller was stunned to hear this. She looked at the two and understood their actual relationship. But she keeps it to herself since her profession is to respect her patients' privacy. Her job is to help them if they have physical problems and seek her knowledge. "All right, I'll give you a body checkup. Can you remove your jacket, Crystal?" Crystal lowered her gaze to avoid the doctor's eyes while reluctantly removing her jacket. Dr. Miller acted not surprised at all seeing the marks on her body. This made Crystal relieved. She gave her a physical checkup and then mumbled as she carried on. "How many times do you have sexual intercourse each month?" "Ah, no." "Tell me, how many times have you exercised excessively each week?" Crystal blushed. She glanced at Galvin, seeking help and permission if she had to answer that with honesty. However, the guy remained silent. He even avoided meeting her eyes. Now he doesn't want to admit his crime. Crystal sneered inwardly. After all, she was carrying his firstborn, so it was his fault that she began experiencing the symptoms and suffered from it. When none of them answered, Dr. Miller didn't press on. She uttered some advice to the couple. "You shouldn't forget to eat enough nutritious food," Dr. Miller added, pointing to Crystal that it reddened her ears. "Does she need scanning? Isn't it better to get her some blood tests?" said Galvin, out of the blue. Crystal panicked, but she concealed the worry in her eyes. She simply nodded at Galvin's suggestion. Dr. Miller concurred and busied herself inscribing on a paper for some test requests. She then handed it to Crystal. Crystal bit her lip, as she could not find an excuse not to draw out her blood. She reluctantly went to the laboratory section, while Galvin stayed in Dr. Miller's clinic. Tired, wet, Nessie scanned her reflection in the mirror. She applied more concealer under her eyes to hide the dark circles she gained from last night's shift. "Mr. Hudson, have some coffee." She approached Galvin and offered a cup of coffee, which to her dismay the man refused at once. "No, thank you. I have hyperacidity." "Oh," biting her red lips, she persuaded him. "Then I'll prepare something else for you." "You needn't trouble yourself." Nessie beamed. She had no way of missing this opportunity to get close to one of the man's dreams of every girl in this city. It's okay, Mr. Hudson. After all, your family donated new medical tools and equipment to the hospital. I wanted to convey my gratitude. I mean, we are so grateful for your kindness on behalf of Brooke General Hospital. Galvin merely nodded. He didn't say much as his grandparents who originally donated those medical machines. Nessie was disappointed that Galvin was cold to her. He doesn't even look at her. Since her shift is over, she has already changed into tight jeans and a crop top that shows off her cleavage. Apparently, she made an effort to flirt with Galvin, but the man was cold and reserved like a giant rock. My fashion sense is better than Crystal's. Why is he wasting time accompanying her? What was their relationship anyway? Probably Crystal is his maid. When Crystal showed up wearing a halter dress, but wrapped herself in a dull color jacket, she almost laughed. If it isn't for Galvin's presence, she is already rolling on the floor, laughing hysterically. But Galvin is such a snub that she understands he doesn't want to be bothered anymore. Thus, Nessie picked up the tray and decided to drink the coffee herself. Wait! She was already at the door when Galvin stopped her. She was about to celebrate, thinking she maybe had a chance, and Galvin was finally attracted to her after he saw her round ass. But Galvin held her up just to question her regarding Crystal's frequent visits to the hospital. It upset her, so she didn't tell the truth but made up a story. I don't know what Miss Pearson is doing in the hospital, Mr. Hudson. I saw her talking to different residents' doctors. Maybe one of them is her boyfriend. I often notice she brought some cakes and muffins. It looks like she baked them herself. How sweet is she to deliver her boyfriend's snacks? Nessie kept her eyes sparkling, like it thrilled her to witness a hospital romance story. Nessie intends to draw a line between Crystal and Galvin so that he would believe Crystal is already taken. Listening to the nurse blab, a storm was boiling inside Galvin's chest. Hospital romance, huh? He sneered in his heart. Galvin didn't notice. He clenched his palm into a ball of fists. He was exasperated as indecent thoughts played in his head. Galvin was in a trance, having all that information he could not swallow. He found himself standing at the director's office. However, the older man hadn't arrived yet. The person he talks to is his secretary. I want you to give me the files of these doctors, he ordered the secretary with a stern tone that caused her to tremble. After a few minutes, the files were in his hands, and he wasn't happy to read the information of these doctors. Each man is from age 30 up to 40s. They are all good-looking and competent. Are these kinds of men her type? Isn't I far better than them? Galvin was confident that he was more handsome than these doctors. Not only that, he was far more outstanding and wealthy. He could no longer suppress the anger that threatened to erupt any time soon. Galvin hadn't noticed how his brain works, and his way of thought was a sign of an obsessed man. He was oblivious to his feelings, and his actions became like an obsession over Crystal. Crystal did all her scanning, and the results were in her hands. However, she was reluctant to show her lab test results to Galvin. When she returned to the clinic, she only found Nessie throwing a dagger at her. She asked her where Dr. Miller was, but Nessie blurted out that a patient in the VIP wards needed her attention. What upset her? Every time she came by, she never forgot to give Nessie and Dr. Miller a slice of cake she had baked for the children's patients in the cancer department. Nessie, do you know where Mr. Hudson is? Why would I know? Am I his mother? Nessie replied harshly. Crystal raised a brow to see how foul her mood was. She need not guess the cause of it. She knows who caused it. Nessie probably flirted with Galvin, but Galvin coldly rejected her. Huh, poor girl. Crystal lifted the corner of her mouth. Several women have tried to seduce Galvin, but she knows better that only one woman is in his heart. Thus, She pitied those girls, including herself. Crystal was pulled out of her reverie when her phone rang. It was Galvin. Hello, Galvin. She was excited to answer his call, hence she forgot that someone was nearby. Now Nessie is giving her a suspicious glare. Ahem, Mr. Hudson. I finished my tests. Where are you? That's good. Hurry and come to the mansion. Grandma had an accident, and it irritated her to see Fiona. You are the only one who could pursue her to calm down and drink her medicine. It surprised her that Galvin had actually left and rushed to the mansion. But the news actually made her happy. This time, she could finally breathe. But at the thought that Fiona appeared before the matriarch Hudson, Crystal admired her thick face. Crystal was about to hang up when Galvin added that caused her legs to stagger. Crystal, please put forward our divorce tonight. Grandma would listen to you. Has she had a choice? Crystal reached for her belly and caressed it affectionately. She nibbled her bottom lip, suppressing her sobs. She thought Galvin didn't want to bring up their divorce before his grandmother's birthday. But why is he asking her to inform the older lady? Unless Fiona pleaded with him to hurry the divorce, it explains why Galvin suddenly was anxious. She pressured him. Galvin could never refuse Fiona's demands, but he was ready to do everything to please her. She could have all she wanted without effort, including winning his love. All right. I'll talk to Grandma. After a long while, she finally mustered enough strength to answer. I'm glad to hear that. Then don't let Grandma wait for long. She didn't stop demanding that I call you. I understand, Crystal answered. She knew very well his heart always belonged to Fiona, so it was a waste of time to compete with her. Ultimately, she has no courage to implore Galvin to postpone their divorce. Thank you. Bye. Galvin ended the call. She could no longer stifle the pain lingering in her chest. Her tears finally had the freedom to stream down her pale face. After she calmed down, she hailed a taxi and headed to the mansion. The older lady was elated to see her entering the door. When she arrived, "My dear Crystal, you're finally here. Hello, Grandma. Hurry, hurry. Come sit beside me and let me look at you." Crystal smiled when the matriarch Gloria Hudson behaved like a child. "Grandma, I should be the one to check on you." When she said that, displeasure flared in the older lady's face. She then laments, "I was delighted when Galvin rushed home. I thought he came with you, but I didn't expect him to bring a pest instead." Crystal understood who the older lady was referring to. She held herself not to crack when Gloria called Fiona a pest. She is sure that Fiona is fuming in anger now, but she could not show her true colors before the older lady, but acted pitifully to earn Galvin's sympathy. On the other hand, Galvin had a grim expression when his grandma blurted out that without caring about his feelings or Fiona's. Nonetheless, he could not counter the older lady, but his only choice was to remain silent. After all, Crystal is so good at comforting his grandma. It was the reason he could not put forward to discuss the divorce in front of her. He didn't want to make her unhappy, so he was in a difficult situation. "Grandma, don't be angry at Galvin. I was the one who urged them to check on you first." Crystal coaxed the older lady, but the look on her face proved she was not convinced. Fiona can't stand how Crystal is having a delightful conversation with the older lady. She was exasperated that Galvin did nothing but keep his silence. She glared at him, then her gaze shot on Crystal. "Crystal, how dare you take the credits that are supposed to be mine? I was the one who phoned Galvin that Gloria got into an accident. However, Gloria doesn't like her. She cannot flaunt to the older lady that she was the one who convinced Galvin to visit the Hudson mansion as soon as possible. And the question of where she learned about it is not important. She has her ways. Regardless, she was unhappy because her effort to get close to the older lady never bore fruit. And this was because of Crystal. Meanwhile, Gloria completely ignored the other people surrounding her. She was looking at Crystal with sincerity. I am fine. If anything serious happens to me, I would rather be not in peace that Galvin leaves you alone in the hospital. How are you? I heard you are unwell. Crystal beamed. You have nothing to worry about me, Grandma. Instead, please look for yourself. Remember that you are not in your youth anymore. The older lady winced. I am well. In fact, I can live longer because I am keen to meet my great-grandchildren. Now, when are you and Galvin going to give me a grandson? I am so bored at home. This mansion is too huge, but no one is making noises. Crystal trembles at the older lady's request. This matter is not for her to decide alone, but with Galvin's choice. However, he already put forward their divorce. Hence, she was no longer willing to share the good news but kept it from the older lady. I'm sorry, Grandma. Crystal's heart aches, fearing how long she could hide it after she experienced the indications that she was pregnant. She glanced at Galvin, who was also staring at her. Gloria noticed when the couple locked eyes. Just then, she realized that something was not right. It startled everyone when she suddenly bellowed at someone. Why are you sitting next to Galvin? Now that Crystal, his legal wife, is here, you should stay away from my grandson. After uttering this, she patted Crystal's hand and urged her, Go sit beside your husband. Crystal smiled awkwardly. It's all right, Grandma. I am fine sitting beside you. Gloria frowned. She asserted, You and Galvin should sit together. I bought that love seat, especially for you and Galvin. Crystal doesn't want the older lady to feel upset, as it is unsuitable for her health. She rose from the sofa and walked toward the love seat Galvin and Fiona had seated. Fiona was reluctant to get up, but she doesn't want to provoke the older lady. On the other hand, Galvin was displeased that Crystal had been filled with comforting his grandma. He glared at Crystal and whispered through gritted teeth. Fiona is a dear friend to me. I invited her to see Grandma together, so she is my guest. Crystal needed clarification about what Galvin tried to justify. It hurts her to be treated unfairly. She was still his legal wife. However, it is oblivious to her that Galvin is still furious after his wrong assumption regarding Crystal's frequent visits to the hospital. Are you crying? Although it startled him to see Crystal shed tears, it didn't reduce his anger. Now she was putting up a drama in front of Grandma. Don't be childish, Crystal, said Galvin, after seeing her shedding tears. I am childish. Crystal had rendered speechless, then sneered in her heart, but she did not retort immediately. She lowered her gaze to mask the pain in her eyes. After mere seconds, she pulled herself together and wiped the tears staining her face. If this had happened in an ordinary condition, there's no way she would cry at Galvin's impassive treatment. However, ever since she was pregnant, she could no longer control her emotions, and he mistakenly believed she was putting up with an act. In all honesty, she holds no control over her mood swings. It will kick out all of a sudden, any time throughout the day. Thus, she needs to keep it in check. Regardless, she won't blame Galvin entirely. Besides, she has no plan to look pitiful before him. She's no pushover, composed. Crystal raised her head, meeting Galvin's accusing gaze. Sadness flashed through her eyes as needles punctured her heart and went numb. She pursed her lips to stifle her dismay. She leaned over and uttered in his ear, Galvin, you see, I haven't made a fuss when you propose a divorce. Nor have I stopped you when you get back together with Fiona. Upon hearing that, Galvin's face darkened. Huh? Surely you didn't, as you have countless spare men. He was about to counter when Crystal continued. Now I am childish in your eyes? I have no reason to act like one. Should I? Crystal sized up Galvin from the corner of her eyes. When there was no response from him, she went on. I am not heartless to make Grandma sad. She may say she is well, but we both know she is no longer the vigorous woman as before. She aged and had a weak heart. So I am pretending we are intimate to dissipate her anger, and she would stop complaining that Fiona keeps clinging to you even though you are a married man. Crystal draws a logical point, making Galvin embarrassed upon realizing it was he who acted immaturely. Yet, he firmly blamed Crystal. His calmness only lasted a few seconds when he recalled the nurse's words a while back. He suppresses his irritation and sits upright with no motion next to Crystal. At that point, he chose not to oppose anymore for the older lady's satisfaction. It displeased his grandma when he brought Fiona back. When Fiona phoned him, she was sobbing to relay that Gloria had slipped in the bathroom. Fiona was genuinely concerned for the older lady, but it was never acknowledged. Hence, his heart ached when Fiona was shoved into the corner. Fiona looked too pitiful, standing there alone. Seeing how obedient she was, Galvin's heart even softened. Galvin kept stealing a glance at her from the corner of his eyes. It was valid with affection. He didn't hide how concerned he was, and at the same time, his desire to protect her. But Galvin couldn't dare to incite his grandma. Still, she was the one who raised him and showered him with love. He was not the man he is today if it weren't for her nurturing and support to make his dreams come true. Thus, he endured his agony not to walk up to Fiona and accompany her to stand in the corner. Oblivious to what truly was happening, Gloria was delighted to see her grandson and granddaughter-in-law whispering to each other. Crystal and Galvin are both good-looking and outstanding. She was ecstatic to approve of these two's marriage because, in her eyes, they were a match made in heaven. "Dinner is ready, ma'am." Not long after, the head steward announced that lunch was now served. Gloria called Crystal and Galvin to help her walk toward the dining hall. The latter was helpless when his grandma acted childish again. He couldn't also ask Fiona to join them. He worried that the older lady would become frantic. Thus, he put pressure on Crystal. Crystal sensed Galvin's burning glare, but she ignored it. Instead, she immersed herself in ushering the older lady to the head chair, the throne that belonged to the real Mrs. Hudson. Why would she yield? Gloria is correct. She is the legal wife and should act as one. She has the upper hand as long as she and Galvin still need to sign the divorce agreement. Galvin was left aggrieved. He glanced at Fiona, but the older lady cried out, "Galvin, why do you not pull a chair for your wife? Is this how you treat her at home?" The older lady was indignant about how disappointing her grandson was. Galvin had no choice but to heed his grandmother. He pulled a chair for Crystal and sat next to her. The dishes displayed on the table are all his favorites. Yet, he couldn't swallow when he thought Fiona wasn't offered anything. In contrast, Crystal ignored Galvin's indifference. She eats with relish that delights the older lady. After the meal, Gloria invited Crystal and Galvin to have tea in the garden. However, Galvin hurried to bid goodbye, and the older lady failed to stop him when he reasoned Fiona had a stomachache from missing lunch. That woman! Gloria was livid. She looked at Crystal, and she felt a pang in her heart. "Crystal, I hope you don't misunderstand why Galvin is too nice to Fiona. All right, my grandson would realize one day how blessed he was to marry someone like you. You are a good wife. If only you and Galvin have a child, I am certain he would dump that gold digger in an instant." Crystal keeps mum. The older lady's remarks brought a dispute into her heart. Is it good to tell Grandma I now bear Galvin's son? But what will happen after I reveal her pregnancy? Would Galvin choose me? What if I was the one to be dumped by Galvin after I gave birth? Having this view, Crystal swore at her heart. I would not allow that to happen. Crystal was conflicted. She pondered it repeatedly. Grandma, what if Galvin doesn't want a child with me? What if he only plans to? Crystal trailed off the rest of her words. She sobbed and waited for the older lady's reaction. That I would not allow, she spat. How dare he not agree to have children with you? I told him not to let you have a job so that the two of you could focus on having children. It's been a year. I could no longer wait. Gah, that grandson of mine wishes I would die too soon. After tea, Gloria returned to her bedroom to take a nap. Crystal took the excuse to go home and lounged in the living room. The villa was lonely, with Galvin's absence. The man was nowhere to be found because he wasn't home yet. But he accompanied his ex-girlfriend to her apartment. On her way home, Fiona sent her a message with a photo of Galvin, wearing an apron, busying himself in front of the cooktop, stirring the pot. Crystal, tell me. Did Galvin ever cook for you? He never did, am I correct? Galvin told me he prepared nothing for you in the 1 year he was married to you. But look at him now. Without hesitation, he cooked my favorite soup when I told him my abdomen was still hurting. This is how Galvin loves me, Crystal. Stop believing he will fall in love with another girl other than me. Crystal could imagine Fiona's smug face when she typed through these messages. Ha! She clenched her hand where her fingernails were digging into her palm. Clearly, Fiona is flaunting how Galvin spoiled her. Galvin may be generous to her by giving her a hefty allowance, a house, and a nice car still. What she wants are Galvin's love and genuine affection. In the 1 year they were married, Galvin never fixed a meal for her, not even peeling an orange for her or opening a can of sauce when she prepared their supper. But now that Fiona had returned, he didn't mind being in charge of the kitchen, which was not even their home but someone else. Crystal felt extreme suffocation from the emotion that erupted in her chest. Now it was the moment she must face the truth. She failed not only to make him fall in love with her. As well, her chances of doing so were over. Crystal wiped the tears that she didn't notice that welled up in her eyes. If it weren't for her phone chiming, she wouldn't realize her vision was blurry. She lifted her chin and stared at the ceiling, contemplating. It's time to continue packing up my stuff. What's the use of keep living with him in this villa? She didn't want Galvin to think how clingy she was after he proposed the divorce. And she agreed. Crystal rose from the sofa and headed upstairs. She boxed her books and other personal stuff she brought over the day she moved to this villa and put them away on the corner since she could not carry them. Similarly, she has to protect the child inside her womb. She was afraid that if she moved heavy things, she would suffer a miscarriage. Thinking of the life growing inside her, Crystal went to the kitchen, fixed something light but nutritious for dinner, and washed up before bed. She was staring at her reflection and admired the woman she saw in the mirror. Crystal knew she was pretty and had a figure envied by similar sex and lusted by the opposite. However, it brought her trouble living a peaceful life as a single lady. Nonetheless, it isn't important to her anymore. May her body proportions be a heavenly gift. She is grateful for having good health, and it amazed her how life is growing inside. Crystal gently stroked her flat stomach in front of the mirror, which was only partly swollen. It cannot even compare to a bloated stomach, but in a few more weeks it will be noticeable. Thank goodness that Galvin used to see her wearing loose clothes and an oversized jacket. It wouldn't be weird if she continued dressing that way when she was several months pregnant. Crystal changed into pajamas, since she didn't expect Galvin to come home. But then, before she could get a wink, her phone rang. She creased her forehead when the caller ID flashing on her phone screen was Galvin's name. Isn't he with Fiona? She wondered. Crystal ignored the call, believing Fiona had another trick by flaunting on her again that Galvin chose to be with her, rather than being with his legal wire. But then someone is persistent. Her phone rang again. This time, it was from an unknown caller. She stared at it momentarily, then swiped the answer button. Hello? Crystal. Why did you hang up? A man laments from the other side of the call. Crystal racks her head to remember who this person is. Galvin only brought her occasionally to his friends' gatherings, thus she was unfamiliar with them. Although these men were infamous to the country, the chances she bonded with them were few. Crystal furrowed her brows, then pursed her lips after finally recognizing the man's voice. She scratched her forehead and asked, "Dave, what's the matter? What kind of wife are you, huh?" Crystal raised a brow upward when Dave roared at her. How despicable, Crystal exhales to maintain a calm temperament. She had only braced herself not to yell at the man. "What do you want? Your husband was drunk as hell. You should come and take him home and put him on the bed." A tinge of worry flashed in her eyes, but when she remembered how Galvin disobeyed Gloria and left with Fiona holding her hands, her concern decreased and was replaced with gloom. "I think you phoned the wrong person, Dave. You should inform Fiona instead and ask her to look for Galvin." "What? Are you sane? How could you say that? Will you allow another woman to take your husband home? Why not?" Crystal shrugged a shoulder. She felt ironic when Dave said that, and at the same time it surprised her when the man made such remarks. "I thought Galvin's friends didn't like me. Willful." Crystal didn't want to assume that Galvin's friends actually acknowledged her as the legal wife instead of Fiona. "Crystal, do you know how every man wishes to have a wife like you? It is also the same about Galvin. Women are lining up, waiting to grab a chance to be his lover. Now someone is acting like she was the legal wife. Are you going to do nothing about that? Aren't you supposed to stand on your ground as, Mr. Claymore, please mind your own business, would you? This marriage is mine and Galvin's. Others' opinions are unneeded. Nonetheless, nobody knows the whole story to assume it was the truth, nor should anyone put their noses into others' marriages." Crystal could no longer bear someone lecturing her regarding her relationship with Galvin. She must be happy that there are people who are actually supporting their marriage, other than her and Galvin's immediate family. However, these people are oblivious that her marriage to Galvin is just a contract. Once Fiona returns and Galvin is still in love with her, the latter will end the contract and propose a divorce. Listening to her statement, the man on the other line was exasperated. Dave recalled the first time Galvin brought Crystal to his exclusive birthday party. Everyone dropped their jaws in the center of the earth. Crystal wore a decent dress, covering almost every inch of her body. But the fabric failed to hide her thin waist and curvy figure. Galvin was pissed off when a friend of his friend that was invited on his birthday flirted with Crystal. If he isn't mistaken, Galvin warned everyone not to hit on Crystal, nor dare to look at her. Since then, it has been once in a blue moon for Galvin to bring Crystal when they have exclusive gatherings. In fact, the man's presence became infrequent, and everyone had a rough guess of the reason. Galvin deliberately hides Crystal from everyone's lustful gaze. Okay. Fine. To hell with yours and Galvin's marriage, but I don't have all the free time in the world to watch your husband. My parents met with an accident. I have to check on them, so I can't spare my time for him over my parents. I have to move now. I'll text you the address." Before Crystal could raise a protest and tell Dave to hail Galvin an Uber service, he had already hung up the call. TSK. Crystal was forced to leave the bed and change into jeans, a turtleneck shirt, and a trench coat. Diamond East Club. When stepping into the club again, such emotion enveloped Crystal's chest. She used to hang out in this club with her friends, but she no longer actively socializes since she signed the marriage contract and dedicated her time as an excellent wife to Galvin. Her friends, who are clueless that she got married to a handsome billionaire, wondered why she vanished on the face of the earth. Most of the time, when she was invited to hang out at their favorite coffee shop, she always turned them down, as she was only keen to keep the house organized. And there was a warm meal she prepared for Galvin. Nonetheless, her main reason for declining is that Galvin would give her different tasks any time of the day, which she willingly took part in. It always thrilled her to obey him, as satisfaction exhibited on his face before he left for work the following day. She is inclined to do all the venereal activity that comes to his mind, hoping she can steal his love. Her world has only revolved around him, to the point of not only her friends she put aside, but even her family. And they only meet occasionally. Now that she is reminiscing memories of her singlehood, she suddenly misses her friends and realizes she needs their shoulders to cry on and vent her aggravation for being abandoned. She decided to throw a divorce party celebration after Galvin finalized their divorce. How petty of me, Crystal chuckled, comforting herself. What could she do? Galvin stood firm in getting back together with Fiona. Even though Gloria backed her up in this marriage, the older lady's outrage did not influence Galvin's love for his ex-girlfriend. May the older lady oppose the relationship. Eventually, Galvin keeps his mind clear to fulfill his promise to Fiona, and she becomes Mrs. Hudson. I know I have no place in his heart, especially in his life. Crystal pursed her lips, masking the sorrow resurfacing in her eyes. Several pairs of eyes followed Crystal, but she ignored them and ascended the staircase at a hurried pace. Can someone usher me toward Mr. Hudson's private booth? Crystal approached the club manager when she had a glimpse of him. She smiled, and the man dropped his jaw upon recognizing her. Oh, dear Crystal, is that you? Hello, Bert. Long time no see. Well, I am here to carry out a task. Ah, I see. I'll accompany you myself since I am not busy. Bert flashes a smile before he spurns around to lead the way. With Bert's help, Crystal doesn't need to carry Galvin herself. The former called his men to do that job. They took the secret back door to avoid getting any attention, and Galvin's car was already waiting outside. Crystal sighed with relief when the two burly men stuffed Galvin in the back seat and buckled him up with a seatbelt. She turned to face Bert and said, "Thanks for your help. My job has become easier. Don't mention Crystal, but you have to let me buy you a drink," said Bert in a friendly tone. There's no hint that he is flirting with her. Thus, she accepts his invitation. Sure. I owe you one anyway. Bye, Bert. Crystal no longer stayed, and she walked into the driver's seat, and before she drove away, Bert waved at her. Good night, Crystal. Have a safe drive. In the villa, Crystal's forehead is sweating profusely. Galvin is dead drunk, and his weight is no joke. She has difficulty carrying him upstairs, since their marriage was just out of a bet with a 1-year term contract and a willingness to play erotic games on a regular basis. Therefore, having help or a servant would make things awkward for her. Thus, she dropped the idea of getting even one maid to take care of the other houseworks. How time flew so fast, Galvin. Longingly, Crystal gazed at the man on the bed. She wished that the 1 year of marriage would not be over yet, but she knew she was the loser in this game even before it started. Galvin Hudson is the man of her dreams. He stole her youth and even her innocence after several years had passed, and she married him. Even though he is unaware of her existence in the past, she never stops loving him. Instead, she became obsessed with him to the point that she would stalk and gather every piece of news she heard after he graduated high school and started attending college. Hence, she knew Fiona was the love of his life. However, Crystal knew Fiona's history better than anyone. She was a woman who navigated relationships with calculated charm, leaving Galvin blinded by a past that wasn't as pure as he believed. And Galvin seemed to look the other way and tolerate her behavior. Therefore, she swears in her heart that after Galvin finds out about Fiona's actual color, she will take her chance and never let him go. Sadly, Galvin is the one who never wants to let go of Fiona. Hence, she is too jealous of how Galvin is devoted to her when she doesn't deserve him. How I dream for you to learn to love me, Galvin. Galvin, I love you. Crystal couldn't suppress the urge to express her ardent affection for him. She was reluctant to agree to the divorce, but would not covet his heart when it didn't belong to her.